It's been a long time since I've been able to say this, but hey, it's Romania Black, and we're starting a new novel! MXTX Monday is back on with novel reactions, bitches, and we're starting Scum Villain Self-Saving System. Oh, these last 10 episodes have been a whirlwind. They've gone by way too fast. I feel like I've made no progress with the series, and I've been teased and tempted beyond all belief. So we are starting volume 1 of the novels. I've collected all 4 novels, so we're going to be able to go straight through novels 1 through 4. I'm really excited. I have not looked at the cover of the novels until now, so I pulled this out of the shelf and was like, oh, I see a lot of green, but look at Shen and Lo. The thing that strikes me the most is that Lo has curly hair, which is so bizarre compared to the Donghua, where it's very sleek. It makes him look completely different. I mean, Shen looks the same. Shen looks the same as far as that goes, but Lo looks totally different. Now, I saw there were characters on the back of this. I'm not going to read the back cover until we finish the novel, and then we'll go and see who's on the back cover and kind of check that out. I have a feeling that as we go through the novels, if there are characters on the back here, there may be characters on the other novels, and so I want to make sure to look at those last so that we don't know who exactly it is, because we may have new characters that we don't want to get spoiled, right? So before we get started, I do want to say a couple things. First, thanks to Reiki and Couscous for getting me the digital copy of the novel to read alongside this. It's a lot easier for me to look up here at my screen and read the novel alongside with you and react than to just stare here and go like this and then look up. So, but obviously I'll be going back through the official version for the discussion portion. I do have a Heaven Official's Blessing bookmark to use to mark my pages. And that's kind of the other thing. Reiki and Couscous went through because they informed me there's only like 5 chapters in this entire book. And I was like, there's only 5 chapters. There's like 5 portions. I wouldn't call them parts. I don't think they have enough chapters to be parts, but there's like 5 portions. And I know me, I want to be able to enjoy savoring the readings each and every week with you all, even if it takes a little bit more time for me to get through the books that way. So for the first couple weeks, we're only going to do like 2 chapters. I'm going to do chapters 1 and 2 today to kind of ease into it, because I remember from episode 1, there was a lot of information up front in those first couple of episodes, and I want to make sure that we get through all of that in a nice, neat, and orderly fashion. And then I have it planned out where it's going to be like the first couple weeks, we're going to do just 2 chapters at a time, ease into it. They might not be long reaction videos, but you know how that goes with me talking. And then after the first couple weeks where we do just 2 chapters, then we're going to start doing like 3 chapters at a time and do a little bit more. I don't want to get over like 40 pages because I think 40 pages is enough to talk about. There's going to be like next week is going to be a pretty short section, but there may be a lot to talk about with it. So I do want to make it to where it's enough for me not to feel overwhelmed and feel like I'm rushing. So that's kind of my goal with these chapters, to do that. And then once we get towards the end, I will say the last portion of book 1 is going to be like 4 chapters or 3 big chapters and a lot of pages. So it'll make up for it. But yeah, so I'm excited. They have told me where to stop at certain parts. Volume 1 is going to take us a little bit of time to get through, but that's okay. I spent like nearly 2 years on Heaven Official's Blessing, and I know that it ain't going to be as long as that. So we'll just see what happens, won't we? But I'm super excited to dive in and see what we get. I will note that when I opened up the front, there were 2 color inserts. One being the cover page, which is really super cute. It has Shen and Lo on there. And the other one being Shen teaching Lo sword fighting. So cute. But that's all I've seen. I've not opened up any further, and we're just going to wait and see what happens with the readings. So I'm really excited, y'all. I can't wait to dive into this and see what we get. But before we start, real quick, I do want to give a special shout out over to our philanthropy tier on Patreon, because you all are the reason I have these books. So I'm really grateful for you all for not only supporting me and my readings, but also supporting me being able to get the official merchandise and supporting MXTX. That's my thing. I want to support MXTX and their amazing writing in any way, shape, or form that I can. So special shout out to Alex Cornejo, to Anime Annie, to Be Happy, to Dana, to Destiny Marie, to Danger Zone, to Eric, to Curie, to Elfreya, to Lyndon, to Matthew Palfinier, to Murphew, to Nicholas, to Nameless Monster, as well as Shimoyama, Sunspots, Translucent Men, Trails, Danny Donmai, Danovan, and In Lee 2. I really appreciate your support. All of my love to patrons, as well as to those of you on YouTube who are so kind and supporting. I super appreciate it. But yeah, so here's my plan. I'm going to read through this chapter. The first two chapters, chapters 1 and 2, go from pages 9 to 31, so that's a decent chunk. I want to read through these pages and actually get to soak in, and then we'll probably bring Whiteboard-Kun or maybe even another friend of Whiteboard-Kun out to talk about the discussion. So we'll just have to see, all right? But we'll do that. So we'll see how that goes, but let's not waste any more time, shall we? I'm ready to start this novel, see how it's different than the Donghua, and just dive right in. So with that being said, we are going to start Scum Villains, Self-Saving System, chapters 1 and 2. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 1, Scum. Now, the chapter in this book, the e-published version, it is going to be literally like chapter 1 Scum is like a big part. So I won't know the individual chapter names, which is a little bit sad compared to Heaven Official's Blessing because I had like each individual chapter's names. This e-publishing version is a little bit different, but that's okay. So this is just the first part of chapter 1, Scum. The Proud Immortal Demon Way was a male power fantasy of a stallion novel. What an opening sentence. What a way to start us out, right? To be more specific, Proud Immortal Demon Way was a monster-fighting, escapist cultivation novel with an incomparably ridiculous length, a golden finger that broke every rule. Oh yeah, the golden finger! And a harem size nearing 3 digits. It was 4 digits in the Donghua. Seeing as nearly every single female character fell for the protagonist. The year's hottest stallion novel, there was no other. Now, stallion novels, are those meant to be like novels for men where it's like a power fantasy and he has like all the women, all the girlfriends, and it's like the opposite of a bodice ripper? Is that what it's supposed to be? The male lead of this novel, Lo Binghe, was neither the kind who started heroic and invincible like a proud dragon of the heavens, nor the kind who was a loser, a good-for-nothing without merit. Yet he managed to trend with tens of thousands of readers on Zongdian literature, inspiring countless other male fantasy novels to follow in his footsteps. He was the kind of lead who was pitch black, dark, and vicious. Though before his heart blackened, he was the kind who suffered misery after misery. So I think that's something important to note that we often forget. We've seen Lo as like the little precious puppy chasing after Shen, so it's easy to forget that he was supposedly this pitch black and dark and vicious bad guy. I already have things that I want to put down for Whiteboard-Kun, but we'll have to get to that, right? Next, let a veteran reader of this novel, Shen Yan. Oh, so that's his name? Omit the countless fan servicey details and concisely summarize the million-word epic for everyone. So Shen, his actual name in real life is Shen Yan. Well, isn't that coincidental? Did he just start reading this because one of the characters was named after him? Okay, so here's the nitty-gritty. This is the stuff that opening of the Donghua was like, here's your exposition, so let's see how it goes. Immediately after birth, Lo Binghe was abandoned by his parents, swaddled in white cloth, and put in a wooden basin that was lowered into the Lo River. This occurred on the coldest days of the year, and it was only thanks to fishermen pulling him out of the water that he didn't freeze to death as a baby. Because he'd been drifting along the Lo in the season when it was choked with thin ice, he was given the name Lo Binghe. Lo Binghe spent his early years wandering the streets hungry and cold, a dreary childhood. A washerwoman who worked for a wealthy family took pity on him, and since she had no children of her own, she adopted and raised him as her own. Mother and son were poor, and they suffered much humiliation at the hands of their rich patrons. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I feel super bad now from the Donghua because I was giving the mom a hard time because her animation wasn't as good as Lo's. And I was like, aren't you supposed to be his mom? She's not his biological mom. She's the one that picked him up. That's right. Damn it. Now I feel bad. Growing up in such unhealthy environments became the foundation of Lo Binghe's future twisted personality post-darkening. Post-darkening, his inclinations to fight over every scrap, seek revenge for the smallest grievance, and hide murderous intent behind a smile. Oh man, we're setting so much up here. Ooh, okay. Once he withstood the beatings of a family's young masters for a bowl of lukewarm meat congri. In the end, he was still too late, and he failed to give his adopted mother even a single taste before she died. Oh, wow. Okay. So there's that incident. By complete coincidence, he was selected for training by one of the cultivation's world's 4 great sects, Kang Chong Mountain. There, he apprenticed under the Zhu Ya sword, Shen Qingcho. Lu Binghe thought he could finally start down the righteous path. He couldn't have expected that Shen Qingcho was fair without but foul within. Trash of the lowest caliber. Oh! Shen Qingcho was jealous of Lo's unparalleled and exceptional talent, and he secretly feared his disciple, whose cultivation improved by leaps and bounds every day. He always found new ways to taunt and demean Lo, even enlisting the boy's peers to belittle him. Throughout these years of studying, Lo endured every humiliation. It was another heart-wrenching arc in his story, filled with blood and tears. After much difficulty, Lo managed to turn 17, at which point he finally participated in the event the cultivation world held once every 4 years, the Immortal Alliance Conference. Oh, wow, so he's 17 when this is going on. Okay, however, at the conference, we're just going to give it away. Lo Binghe fell victim to Shen's scheming, and he tumbled into a crack in the boundary between the human and demon realms, the endless abyss. That's right. Only then did the story truly begin. Oh my God! Okay. Not only did Lo survive, but within the endless abyss, he found his personal sword, the peerless mystical blade Jin Mo. He also learned the truth of his origins. Oh, so the novel's just going to reveal it to us. The Donghua was being mysterious, but the novel's like, let's just get this out of the way up front. Oh my God. As it turned out, Lo had been born to the demon realm's saintly ruler and a woman of the human realm. Within his veins flowed the blood of the ancient heaven-fallen demon, as well as that of the human race. His birth father, Tianlong Jun, had been sealed beneath a great mountain, trapped for all eternity. His birth mother had been a disciple from a righteous cultivation sect, but shortly following Tianlong Jun's sealing, she'd been expelled on suspicion of having secret ties to demons. She had died from a postpartum hemorrhage, oh my God, after giving birth to Lo. But prior to her death, she had set her son adrift from the lonely ship she'd birthed him on. It was the only way she'd been able to give Lo a chance to survive. Lo used Jin Mo to release his body's seal on his demonic blood. Then, within the dark abyss, he single-mindedly cultivated and enlightened himself to otherworldly techniques before heading back to Kangzhong Mountain Sect. From there on out, Lo steadily headed down his dark path, never looking back. Interesting! Oh, we have so much to put on here already. Every single one of his old enemies suffered great torment and died a horrible death by his hand. With his steadily improving ability to lie and scheme, Lo Binghe won the trust of many people, feigning compliance, while, by complete coincidence, he was while secretly plotting against him. He seized power and rose in position, beginning a reign of terror. As the story unfolded, Lo's heart blackened further and further. He returned to the demon realm and inherited the position of saintly ruler. Oh my God! Yet unsatisfied, he began to eradicate each one of the human realm's great righteous sects, bathing them in blood, annihilating all who opposed him. Oh, this makes it seem a lot more violent than the Donghua. The Donghua just made it seem like he came out of the abyss and was like, oh, hey, I'm powerful now, so join my sect and I'm going to be your ruler. This makes it a lot more massacre-y. In the end, Lo became a legend, spoken for generations of immortals and demons, hailed for his unification of the 3 realms and the uncountable size of his harem and his boundless number of descendants. Oh my God, so he has tons of babies. Oh my God. Dumb fuck author, dumb fuck novel. With his dying breath, Shen Yan spat this final curse. Who could have imagined that an upstanding young man like him, who had properly purchased the website's VIP currency and read the novel's official version, would find himself persevering before his untimely death to finish a novel so stallion, so money-grubbing, and overly padded that it left him speechless with rage. How could he not curse? Proud immortal demon way by airplane shooting towards the sky. Just looking at the euphemistic handle smacked you in the face with a dirty feeling. Grade school level writing with landmines everywhere, breaking all suspension of disbelief. And Shen couldn't bear to call that incoherent mess of a world the author had built a cultivation setting. What kind of cultivation world had people using horses and carriages all day? What kind of cultivation world had people who, after achieving inedia, still needed to eat and sleep? What kind of cultivation world had an author who occasionally mixed up even the stages of foundation establishment in the nascent soul? When faced with the protagonist, every single character acted like his total edgelord aura had devoured their intelligence. Especially Lo's master, Shen, that idiot among idiots, scum among scum. His only purpose was to dig his own grave, and he hadn't even managed to finish before he was killed by the protagonist instead. So why had Shen started this book, even going so far as to read it to the very end? Don't misunderstand. Shen didn't enjoy degrading himself. The reason he had persisted was also what had caused him the most frustration. This novel had an incredible amount of foreshadowing, plot lines everywhere, mystery after mystery, layer upon layer of red herrings. And at the very end, not a single one paid off. It was enough to make him want to puke a fountain of blood. Ooh, okay. So Shen is not happy because the story's not adding up. Is that because the mystery storyline hasn't happened yet? Why were there priceless herbs? Why were priceless herbs, spirit elixirs, and peerless beauties everywhere, but they didn't cost a cent? Why were the villains' speeches and poses as they dug their graves and got offed all exactly the same? The dozens of maidens barely glimpsed, all of whom agreed to enter the harem, what happened to them? All right, skipping that last one for the moment. Who had been the culprit behind the scores of atrocities? Exactly what was the purpose of the unending list of characters so hyped up for being awesome and without equal? Why did none of them make an appearance, even at the very end? Ooh. Towards the sky, bro. Airplane, bro. Great master. Can we have a discussion? Fill in plot holes, okay? Shen felt like he could come back to life with the power of sheer rage. In the endless darkness, a mechanical voice sounded by his ear. Activation code. Dumbfuck author, dumbfuck novel. System automatically triggered. The tone reminded him of Google Translate. Who is this? Shen looked around. Seemed like he was floating in virtual space, so one so dark he couldn't see his hand before him. The voice came from all directions. Welcome to the system. This system operates in line with the design concept. You up? No, no BB. What? We hope to provide you with the best possible experience. It is our sincere wish that during your time, you can fulfill your desires and in accordance with your wish, transform a stupid work into a magnificent, high-quality, first-rate classic. We hope you enjoy. In the midst of the ensuing vertigo, a man's voice asked lightly beside him, Shidi, can you hear me? Shen shuddered and settled his mind, forcibly peeling open his eyes. The scene that appeared before him was a massive, whirling flurry. It took a while for everything to finally coalesce and become clear. He lay on bed, looking up. A white gauzy canopy hung overhead, with finely crafted perfume pouches dangling from the four corners. Looking down, he wore a white robe of an ancient style, and next to the pillow lay a paper fan. Looking to his left, a handsome, elegant young man dressed in Gendron formal robes sat by his bedside, looking at him with concern. Shen closed his eyes and then sharply reached for the folding fan and opened it with a snap. He lightly waved it and fanning away the cold sweat pouring down his face. The man's eyes lit up with joy. Oh, Shidi finally woke up, he said warmly. Do you have any discomfort? Oh, nothing too bad, Shen said with some reservation. The information overlord was a bit much. He dazedly tried to sit up, and as he did, the man quickly reached out to support his back, letting him lean against the headboard. Having read many of Zongdian's transmigration novels, Shen Yan had long ago resolved that if he one day woke up to find himself lying in a strange place, the first words out of his mouth before he understood what was happening definitely wouldn't be a carefree giggle and, "Are you filming a movie? The props look so real. Your crew's finally giving it their all." I.e., the words of a person slow-wittedly trying to find their footing. Rather, Shen Yan concentrated on acting like he'd just woken up. Expression absent-minded. Where is this? The man startled. "Oh, did you sleep yourself into a trance? This is your Qingjing Peak." Internally, Shen Yan was shocked, but he continued to act muddled. Why was I asleep for so long? Oh, okay. So that must have been chapter 1. Oh, look at the picture. Oh, that one looks so good. Yes. Oh, I love that the pictures are on this. Yes. Okay. Well, that's why I wanted to ask you. You were in perfect health, so how did you suddenly come down with such a high fever? I know that with the Immortal Alliance conference approaching, you've been training your disciples and are anxious to see results, but with Kangzhong Mountain being such a well-established and renowned sect, even if one of your own didn't attend this time, no one would dare question us. Why concern yourself with empty words? The more Shen Yan listened, the more something felt off. Why did these lines sound so familiar? No, why did this setup seem so familiar? The man's next sentence, single and earnest, confirmed all his suspicions. "Oh, Qingshou Shidi, are you listening to Shizhong?" At this moment, something dinged, and the mechanical Google Translate-like voice from the dreamscape spoke again. The system was successfully activated. Bound roll. Lo Binghei's master. Kangzhong Mountain Sect's Peak Lord of Xingjing Peak. Shin Qingchou. Weapon. The sword Sha Shu Ya. Starting B points. 100. Fuck. What bullshit is this? How come you're speaking directly into my brain? How does airplane shooting towards the sky know that you're plagiarizing proud immortal demon ways setting like this? Of course, Shen Yan didn't say this out loud, but the voice swiftly responded. You have triggered the system's execution command and have been bound to the Shin Qingshou account. As the plot progresses, various point types will gradually become available. Please ensure that no score falls below 0, or the system will automatically mete out punishment. Sure enough, Shen Yan was sure now. He'd hit the jackpot. He'd transmigrated. Transmigrated into a story he'd just finished. Moreover, even if it was a pitch-black stallion novel he hated, and even if it came with some kind of shitty system, as a 21st century veteran VIP reader of Zhangdian literature, Shen Yan had read various types of do-over and transmigration male power fantasy novels year in and year out, so theoretically, he could have happily and easily accepted this fact, but of all people, the shell he was borrowing just happened to belong to the male lead's scum villain master, Shin Qingchou. This, made the situation rather complicated. The amicable-looking elder brother type beside him was Kangzhou's Mountain Secret current sect leader, Shin Qingshou's Shizhong, the Shan Su sword, Yu Xingyang. Fuck. Oh my god, he's got such a bad sailor mouth. Oh my god. So they don't mention the pickle jar or anything like that. So maybe we're going to find that out later. Possibly. Maybe. Or maybe the Donghua and the novel are a bit different. But interesting. Shin already acknowledging that he's read a ton of these isekai stories is interesting. So he kind of knows how this goes. Also the fact that they talk about borrowing a shell. So does he expect that he's going to migrate out of the story once it's finished? I guess. There's a very important reason that Shen Yan emphatically thought fuck at the sight of Yu Xingjian. In the original work, Yu Qingyan's death had been caused by Shin, okay? Oh, so he caused his death too, not just Liu's? Oh my god. Ah, and what a horrific death it was. Tens of thousands of arrows had pierced him until not even his bones remained. At this moment, the victim was facing his own murderer and showering with concern. The pressure was immense. At this moment, on second glance, though, the story hadn't yet unfolded to that point. Yu was still in perfect health, meaning that at this point in time, Shen had yet to reveal himself as a hypocrite, and his reputation was still pristine. Yu was a bleeding heart, nothing to be afraid of. Though his character ended up suffering quite a bit during his read, Shen Yan had been rather fond of him. He was just about to relax when a string of words floated eerily to the forefront of his mind. Within the dark, gloomy room, a metal chain hung from a beam. At the end of the chain dangled a ring. The ring was fastened around a person's waist, if it could still be considered a person. This person's appearance was filthy and disheveled, like that of a madman. The most frightening thing about him was that all 4 of his limbs had been severed. His shoulders and thighs were only 4 bare knobs of flesh, and when touched he would let out a hoarse ah sound. His tongue had been torn out too, rendering him unable to form complete words. Proud Immortal Demon Way, a selected passage on the Shen Changchong's fate. Oh! So he not only was in a pickle jar, he had all of his limbs and his tongue cut off? Oh, well, that explains why he definitely wants to avoid that fate. Oh my god, we have so much to put on the board already. Shen Qingqiu rested his forehead on his hand. He was in no position to limit the horrors of other people's deaths. The most horrific death was his own, okay? I like that he puts okay at the end of the sentence. Henceforth, he had to avoid any critical errors. First, eliminate any mistake at the root. Second, from now on, cling madly to the male lead's thighs. Third, be a good mentor and a helpful friend who is earnest and gentle in his teachings, meticulously showing the male lead every kind of concern. Oh my god, setting himself up. The moment that Shen had those thoughts, a long string of alarms erupted in his mind, as if 100 police cars carrying 100 shrieking divine beasts were zooming past. It was so cacophonous that he shuddered, clutching his head in pain. Oh, Shitty, does your head still hurt? You asked worriedly. Teeth clenched, Shen didn't answer. Warning! The system shrilly notified him. This proposed plan is incredibly dangerous and qualifies as a violation. Please do not attempt, or the system will automatically met out punishment. Well, how is that a violation? Currently, you are at the beginner level, and the OOC feature is frozen. You must complete a beginner level quest to unfreeze it. Before unfreezing, any act in violation of the original Shen Qingqiu character settings will result in a deduction of a fixed number of B points. As a semi-otaku, Shen had seen a number of fan work related terms here and there. You know what I mean. So of course he knew the definition of OOC, adjective acronym for out of character, defined as breaking character or acting in a way inconsistent with the character's canonical personality. In other words, before that whatever feature gets unfrozen, my behavior and actions can't differ from what Shen Qingqiu would do? Correct. This system had already let him transmigrate into Shen's shell, replacing him, but it still cared about a detail like being out of character? You just said something about how the points can't fall below 0. If they do, what happens? You will automatically be deported back to your original world. Original world? But in Shen Yan's original world, his body had already expired. In other words, if he lost all B or whatever points, what awaited him was, in short, death. So we don't get to see him die from the steam bun of him swallowing it and choking on it, but we don't know exactly what that happened, but we're just assuming, I guess, that something happened and he died as he was cursing the novel. Well, if he just ignored the male lead and avoided doing anything, things would be fine, right? He raised his head and scanned the room, but among the disciples waiting on him by his bedside, he didn't see anyone that matched Lo's description. Feigning unconcern, he said, "Well, where is Lo, Binghe?" Yu paused, giving him a strange look. Shen remained straight-faced, but was secretly filled with glee. Was it possible that the time wasn't ripe? That the male lead had yet to become an apprentice to Kangzhong Mountain Sect? "Oh, Shidi, don't be angry," said Yu. An ominous premonition stirred in Shen's heart. Yu sighed. "I know you don't like him, but that child's already worked hard enough, and he hasn't made any significant mistakes. Don't punish him any further, all right?" Hearing this, Shen felt his lips dry. He wet them and said, "You can just say it. Where is he?" Yu was silent for a moment. "Whenever you finish stringing him up and beating him, haven't you always shut him in the woodshed?" And then his vision went dark. Oh my god! Oh no! Damn, so he didn't just like string him up and beat him once. It was like, whenever you do that, meaning that he's done that several times. Oh no. Also, I am slowly realizing that that you, Qingyan, may not be that bad of a person. I remember back in the first episode, I was like, oh, he's shady as hell. I don't trust him. And everybody's like, are you sure? Are you sure? He seems like a pretty decent guy. And I was like, MXTX has conditioned me to trust no one. But maybe I'm wrong and I can trust him. So I think what makes me feel like I can trust him is knowing that he was originally supposed to die in this novel, kind of like Liu. So interesting. In his previous life. Oh, here we go. I'm good. We're going to get to some backstory here. In his previous life, Shen Yan had been well off growing up, and he basically qualified as a modest example of a second-generation rich kid. His two older brothers had been set to inherit the family business, and he doted on his little sister. The entire family had been very close. From early on, he'd known that even if he idled the rest of his life away, he'd never want for food. Perhaps due to his carefree upbringing, devoid of either competition or pressure, he came to believe that ranking in the top 10 of a competition was good enough, so long as it had more than 10 people. Therefore, he never understood what scum villains like Shen Qingqiu were thinking as they dug their own graves. The original Shen had both training and cultivation and the qualifications to prove his experience, not to mention the self-restraint to put up a facade. He wanted for neither standing nor reputation, and with the support of the world's largest sect, he would have had to want for money either. So why did he have not even a speck of the poise expected of an immortal? Why did he act like one of those bitter courtyard complex concubines with too much time on their hands? Why was he so unable to tolerate the main character no matter how innocuous his behavior? And why did he spend day in and day out scheming up new torments for him, even getting others to do so in his place? Even if Lo was blessed with heavenly talent, and even if his aptitude was exceptional to the point that he was more or less cheating, there was still no need to envy him to that extent, you know? Still, the blame didn't really lie with Shen. It lay with the author. These types of villains were everywhere in the novel, as numerous as the carp in a river. It was just that Shen's character had been especially detailed and especially rotten. What could you do, though? The ultimate boss in the book was the protagonist himself. How could a firefly outshine the sun and the moon? The cultivation world had dubbed Shen the Zhu Ya sword, so naturally he had the appearance and bearing to match. Even now, glancing left and right in a blurry bronze mirror, Shen was quite satisfied with what he saw. Oh, okay. It was a fine-featured face with pitch-black eyes and brows, a thin nose and lips, and a most scholarly air. Combined with the slender body and long legs, he could more or less be considered beautiful. Though his real age was unclear, this was a cultivation novel. Shen had achieved mid-core formation, which meant he'd perfectly preserved his youthful appearance. He was certainly many times better looking than Shen Yan's headcanon for him. He still couldn't compare to Lo. Oh my god! Oh, so already Shen is showing that he's got kind of a crush on Lo, maybe? Possibly? The moment Shen thought of Lo, he was instantly struck with a pounding headache. He wanted to go see Lo, who was currently shut in the woodshed, but as soon as he took a single step, that ear-piercing notification rang out once more into his mind. Warning! OOC warning! Shen Qingqiu would not take the initiative to visit Lu Binghe. Fine, I'll get someone else to bring him. No problem there, right? Shen snapped. He thought for a moment and then called Mingfan. A youth around 16 years old, tall and thin, promptly ran in through the door. This disciple is here. What instructions does Shifu have? So he's a lot thinner, and the Dongwon makes him look bulkier than this description here. Shen couldn't help but send a couple more glances his way. Mingfan's appearance was respectful enough. It was just that his face was a bit unfortunate. With a sharp mouth and sunken cheeks. Internally, Shen tisked and lamented, as expected for classic canon fodder. Oh my god, he's calling Mingfan a filler queen. What? But his face! He's a 10, but his face. Oh my god. This was the most senior of the original Shen disciples. Lo Binghe's Shizhong Mingfan. This was also the legendary lowest level of canon fodder. Needless to say, when it came to things like locking Lo out of the dorms late at night or feeding him false techniques on purpose, Mingfan was the ever-present perpetrator. When Shen felt inclined to torment Lo, Mingfan was always his most useful assistant and most enthusiastic supporter. Knowing that this child's fate in the original work wasn't much better than his own, Shen couldn't help but look at him with a pitying gaze of a fellow victim. Go bring Binghe here. Mingfan was plainly unnerved. Whenever Shen had called for Lo in the past, he'd always referred to him as that little beast. Ungrateful brat, this wretch or whelp. He'd hardly ever used Lo's full name more than a few times. Where'd the sudden change come from? But Mingfan didn't dare question a command from his Shifu. He jogged to the woodshed right away and kicked the door twice. Get out! Shizun's calling you! Shen paced within the room, exhaustively examining the system within his mind. B points, also known as points awarded for being a badass. Oh my god, that's what they are! The more B points one accrues, the more magnificent, high quality, and first rate the work has become. Oh my god, this author is... Yeah, I get why he's like, this novel's shit. Then how can I raise my B points? 1. Change the nonsensical plot and raise the average IQ of the villains and supporting characters. 2. Avoid landmines that break a suspension of disbelief. 3. Ensure the main character's satisfaction points. 4. Discover and finish hidden plot events. Shen analyzed each option one by one. In short, not only did he have to clean up the original Shen's messes, the Shen who'd had a veritable mob of enemies coming for his ass, he also had to stop other characters from creating more messes. He didn't even know how he could preserve his own sorry life, and here he still needed to ensure that the main character preserved his OP-ness, time in the spotlight, and harem size. All the unsolved mysteries, those plot holes the author had neglected to fill, and now Shen had to grab a shovel and sweat away filling them in himself. Great master. Airplane shooting towards the sky had claimed that proud immortal demons' way was their purpose was perfectly clear, and that each word had been written with a single goal in mind, to satisfy the reader. This was especially evident in how, in the future, the OP male lead would play innocent, a wolf in sheep's clothing, hunting other wolves, exacting revenge against lowlives, generating enough satisfaction to overturn the heavens. Thus, the work's popularity had swelled rapidly as it grew longer and longer, until no foot-binding cloth could compare to its length. Wow, this is kind of like, sort of parodying MXTX writing her own story and having the chapters come out over a long period of time. Keeping track of the plot had been stressful even as a reader. Insane landmines everywhere. How could he manage to avoid all of them? What kind of plot would qualify as not nonsensical? Shen asked. The standard is subjectively determined. It depends on the reader's reactions. Then how many points do I need to collect to launch a beginner-level quest? The timing is situationally determined. When the requirements have been met, the system will automatically notify you. Subjectively determined, situationally determined. What, an all-purpose remedy? Shen scoffed. And then upon hearing the door open, he looked back to see the youth slowly walk in. Shizun. The youth spoke respectively even though his movements were unsteady, and he still maintained to stand perfectly straight. The small smile that had been forming at the corner of Shen's mouth froze. He was definitely dead. Before him was the face that would, in the future, infatuate everyone who saw it, from 80-year-old women to infants still in their swaddling cloths. The Gary Stu protagonist's face! And he'd beaten it to this extent, he was dead! But even though this face bore clear evidence of abuse and was covered in injuries, the protagonist was, as expected, still the protagonist. Lo Binghe's 2 eyes were as bright as morning stars, a tender shoot of a handsome young man. That firm yet humble countenance, demonstrating his noble and unyielding spirit, that pencil-straight back and stance, evincing a proud core that would rather break than bend. In that instant, a flood of parallelisms and other stylistic devices flooded through Shen's heart, passage after passage jumbling together into constant stanzas of praise that almost spilled forth out of his mouth. Luckily, Shen managed to rein it in, albeit while internally yelling about how close he'd come. The underlying hardware of this protagonist's halo of excellence was really too much. He almost couldn't hold back. So he was like getting ready to praise him. Like he likes Lo from the book and wanted to praise him? Okay. Huh. All right. Oh, wow. And there he is with his big curly hair. And there's Ming Fan. Shen Qingqiu's mouth twitched as he watched Lo limp through the door, then struggled to kneel. I can't afford your submission. If you pay respects to me today, you are definitely going to kneecap me in the future. No need, Shen stopped Lo, and with a flick of his wrist he tossed over a small bottle. This is medicine. He paused before adding in a mocking tone. Don't let anyone see. They might think that my Qijing Peak abuses its disciples. Shen had assumed his role quickly. Even though he'd done something daringly subversive by handing over the medicine, he'd also done it with a nasty attitude. Therefore, it was passably in line with Shen's hypocritical nature, his tendency to do evil while he simultaneously feared others finding out. Indeed, the system did not send an OOC notification. Shen let out a sigh of relief. Lo had expected that his master had called him for further instruction. He never would have thought that he had been offered medicine. At first he froze, then he respectfully received the small bottle with both hands and said with honest gratitude, "Well, thank you for the medicine, Shizun." At this point in time, Lo's face was still full of innocence, his smile sincere and gentle like a warm dawning sun. Shen stared at it for a while and then turned his head away. Oh my god, he is so gay! It is within the first page of him looking at Lo, it's so obvious that he likes Lo. Oh my god, come on now. And prior to his darkening, the male lead's personality was that of a model and upright youth. Shine a bit of sunlight on him and he'd glow. Give him a scrap of goodwill and he'd return it tenfold, that type. It would not have been an exaggeration to call him a little lamb. This disciple will henceforth redouble his efforts and not let Shizun be disappointed, Lo happily continued. And no, if you redouble your efforts, I'm guessing your original master would really be disappointed. If Shen hadn't read Proud Immortal Demon Way, he would have found the sight of this scene heart-wrenching, and he probably would have shed a couple of sympathetic tears for Lo's plight. As it was, he'd seen everything from beginning to end from an omniscient perspective, and he'd been privy to Lo's plentiful and colorful thoughts post-blackening. To wit, Lo's current pitifulness directly correlated to the future ferocity of his wanton laughter as he ground his foot into your head. Though he would wear the mask of a kind and humble gentleman, inside, all of his thoughts would be about how he'd rip out your tendons, pull out your bones, peel off your skin, and hang it out to dry. Lo Binghe smiled. Today, the humiliation this disciple once suffered will be returned 100-fold. For injuring my hands and feet, I'll tear off your limbs and grind them to dust. Proud Immortal Demon Way, selected passage number 2. After that, he had, in actual fact, carved Shen into a human stick. Binghe, how's your cultivation progress? Shen asked in a deliberately aloof tone as he moved to sit into a sandalwood chair. With that single Binghe, he terrified himself to the point that he frightened goosebumps that rose all down his back. Lo's back also shook with a clear shudder, and he still managed a smile tinged with shyness. This disciple is stupid and still failed to understand. That was about right. With the fake cultivation manual, the fact that he hadn't yet suffered a chi deviation was all thanks to his incredible protagonist-level durability. If he'd actually understood anything in that manual, it would have been a miracle. Boy, come hang out with me, Shen yelled within his heart. This master will deliver you into the correct techniques. That demonic system's warning notification started blaring incessantly. I was only thinking about it, Shen said to the system. Of course I know it would be a violation. He spoke out casually. Today this master punished you out of his own impatience. After all, time waits for no one. Now that I think about it, you've been under me for a while. How old are you this year? This disciple is 14, Lo obediently replied. 14, huh? That meant at this point, this master and this disciple, Shen and Lo, had already passed the incident at the mountain entrance. There, the latter had been forced to kneel as punishment. It meant they'd also passed the incident where Lo's fellow Qijing Peak disciples had pummeled him en masse, as well as the incident where he had backtalked Shizun and been strung up and beaten, in addition to the incident where he'd ruined the Peak talismans and been punished with hard labor. Such a glorious track record. Shen waved goodbye to his last hope of survival. Shen rested his forehead on one hand and waved Lo with the other. I wish to be alone. Shen Qingqiu was an easygoing person. Since his residential address had already changed to Proud Immortal Demon Way, and since he'd already kicked the bucket in his original world, he had figured he might as well try to make it work here. He arrived at a cultivation setting, received a body with a decent martial ability and swordsmanship for free, and was also part of a famous righteous sect. If he wanted to stand out, he could stand out. And if he wanted to lie low, he could hole up on Kangsho Mountain Sect's Cheating Peak and be a recluse. What was there to complain about? The only slightly difficult thing would be finding a girlfriend. In this sort of male power fantasy stallion novel, every woman inevitably belonged to the male lead, as long as she wasn't ugly. Everyone knew this. Still, Shen was a man of a few needs. He would have been satisfied just idling away to a ripe old age. In that way, it wouldn't be that difficult or different from his previous life and how it had been going. So Shen is basically saying there that he's never needed a girlfriend, never wanted one, never needed one. So is that just because he doesn't realize that he likes men yet? And he's just not been aware of that fact, and he's never wanted a woman? That's what it sounds like to me. However, while Lo was a factor, making a name for himself was right out. If Shen remained anywhere near the original work settings, even if he found some non-existent paradise to seclude himself in, once Lo took power, he'd still be able to carve Shen into a human stick. It's not that I don't want to cling to the male lead's thighs, but who made him so damn black-hearted? He's the type who seeks thousand-fold retribution. After his daily cursing at Great Master Airplane, Shen quickly set some goals. In short, familiarize himself with the environment, work with the system as much as possible, diligently pursue more accomplishments, earn B points, and unfreeze the OOC function as soon as possible. If the situation started looking grim, he'd have to seek out an alternative strategy. Kangzhong's 12 peaks were like 12 giant swords, forged by nature, steep and magnificent, piercing the skies. Shen's Qijing Peak wasn't the tallest, but it was the most tranquil, heavily forested with tall bamboo. On top of that, basically all of Shen's disciples needed to learn the four scholarly arts of GOOOO playing, Go, calligraphy, and painting, from time to time, the clear sounds of reading and the murmur of GOOOO would adrift on the breeze. It was an excellent destination for scholarly youths, steeped in ancient arts and literature, and perfectly aligned with the needs of the original Shen. That poser. As Shen passed a group of disciples, they respectfully asked after his health. He schooled his countenance to match the original's cold, aloof look, nodded slightly while walking with his hands clasped behind his back. He managed to get by with this, troubled only over how he was supposed to match the book's names to those wavering faces. This wasn't Shen's most pressing concern, however. That was self-defense, and for that he needed to figure out how to employ the original flavor's martial ability and swordsmanship. If he remembered correctly, before Lo had darkened, Kangzhong Mountain Sect suffered a succession of significant incidents, things like demonic incursions and the Immortal Alliance Conference. Shen would have to deal with all of them. If all he had to work with was a shell with no cultivation ability, forget following the plot, the male lead wouldn't have had to lift a finger before an insignificant no-name monster got him killed. Shen walked deep into the forest alone. Only after confirming that no one was in sight did he remove the sword at his waist. He held the scabbard out in his left hand and hilted the right, and he slowly pulled it out. Zhuya had been with Shen since he was young and newly known, and it could have been considered prestigious unto itself. The flash of its blade was snow white, luminous but not blinding, definitely a top-class armament. When one channeled spiritual energy into the weapon, the blade glowed faintly. As Shen pondered exactly how to channel spiritual energy, the sword in his hand began to shimmer white. It seemed like he'd inherited the original's cultivation and martial abilities as well. His mind had filled in the gaps without him needing to consciously remember. Wanting to see Zhuya's power, Shen casually slashed once. Who knew a single slash would be so terrifying? The sword's arc dazzled like a flash of lightning released from his palm, so bright even UV 400 sunglasses wouldn't have saved him if he hadn't closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he beheld a deep ditch that had been carved into the ground as if it had been split by lightning. Holy shit! Shen remained expressionless, but his heart surged with exhilaration. It's so damn awesome! Power worthy of a character who was a peak's soul master. With this level of cultivation, if he diligently trained for the next 20 years, then maybe in the future, as a last resort, if he had to face that overpowered Lo, he just might be able to flee in disgrace. Yes, All he wanted was to be able to flee in disgrace. He wanted to practice more, but he heard the sound of subtle footsteps snapping dry twigs. In truth, the sound was still a long way off, but his 5 senses were highly sensitive, and it would have been difficult not to notice. Shen studied that deep ditch in the ground, then sheathed his sword with a clink before hiding himself within the greenery. The footsteps came closer and closer, and there was more than one person. As expected, the moment later, the first face to appear was Lo's, seeming to shine with its own light. The first sound, however, was the crisp, delicate voice of a young maiden. "Ah, Lo, ah, Lo! There's such a huge ditch in the ground here." Upon hearing this name, Shen almost staggered from his hiding place. "Shen Qingqiu's youngest female disciple, Ning Yingying," the system said concisely. "What use was that introduction?" Shen hissed. "Everyone knows that the only person that dresses Lo is that way is her." The pretty girl following Lo came into view as well. She looked slightly younger than Lo, lovely and adorable, her braided hair bound with orange ribbons as she ran and skipped, brimming with naivete. Every proper cultivation novel had to have a charming young shime type. This young shime inspired some complicated feelings in Shen. This was because he had designs on Ning Yingying. No more like the original Shen had designs on Ning Yingying. Shen Qingqiu's character settings were stuck on shady hypocrite, since on the surface he looked pure-hearted, free of desire, and immune to wicked temptations. Then beneath that surface, he had to be immoral, shameless, scummy, and despicable. He was a teacher, but he harbored filthy intentions towards his obedient and cheerful disciple. He tried to carry them out several times in the story, and he very nearly succeeded. One can, however, imagine the result of daring to try to get a taste of the male lead's woman. While reading, Shen had thought it a little strange that Lo hadn't tried to castrate the creep. His failure to do so absolutely didn't jive with Bing's dark charm, so he'd gone to the comments section and joined a mob in flooding it with posts to the tune of, "Please castrate Shen Qingqiu! No castration, we unsubscribe!" Oh my god! Well, I feel like Lo wouldn't castrate him because of reasons we now think of in the story, but oh my god! Upon reflection and closer consideration, Shen Qingqiu was profoundly terrified. If the appeal had succeeded, then he'd absolutely had to chop off the hand with which he had made those posts. Oh my god. Lo glanced over and offered only a half-hearted smile. But Ning Yingying wanted his attention, and she fumbled around for something to say. Tell me, Alo, which Xinjiang was practicing their sword glares out here?" "On Xingjing Peak, I'm afraid only Shizun had this level of cultivation." Lo answered as he picked up an axe and started chopping at a tree. He only spoke one line and then paid her no more heed. His focus was entirely on his own actions as he raised and lowered the axe, chopping in earnest. The trees were neither thin nor weak, and the axe was half rusted. At this time, Lo was only 14 years old, so chopping was tremendously taxing, and soon sweat poured down his face. Ning Yingying sat on an old log, watching him with her face propped in her hands. After a while, she was bored again and wheedled, "Ah, Lo, play with me." "I can't." Lo didn't even have the time to wipe away his sweat. He continued to swing the axe as he spoke. "Our Xinjiang told me that after I finish chopping today's wood, I have to carry the water. If I finish chopping quickly, I can clear out some time to meditate." "Our Xinjiang are really awful. Always making you do this and that. It always looks to me like they're bullying you on purpose." Ning Ying pouted. "I'll go back and tell Shizun. Once I do, they won't dare bully you anymore." Until this point, Shen had been treating this experience like he was at a shoot for a scene in the Proud Immortal Demon Way drama, just passing through, and enjoying a tale of 2 childhood sweethearts. But upon hearing this, he paled in shock. "Oh, no, you can't come and tell me. What am I supposed to do? I can't be out of character. Who exactly should I punish?" But this time, even while the young Lo was experiencing the full depth and breadth of humanity's hardships, he still had the pure heart of a white lotus. He shook his head at Ning Yingying. "Absolutely don't. I don't want trouble Shizun with these small matters. Our Shizong, they don't mean any harm. They just see that I'm young and they want to give me more chores to train, or more chances to train." In that instant, Shen could almost see 10,000 rays of light behind Lo Bing's head. He couldn't help but back up 3 steps, unable to look directly at a male lead who had achieved such a transcendent state of being, who'd attained such profound enlightenment. While Ning Ying chattered, Lo finished chopping his quota of wood. Putting the axe away, he found a random patch of relatively clean ground and sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. In his heart, Shen released a long sigh. In truth, even during the early misery-ridden part of the storyline, the protagonist's overpowered nature had already started to emerge. The cultivation manual Mingfan had given Lo was a fake. The more he trained by following it, the more his techniques should have degraded until they were absolute rubbish. But with his peerless talent and his body's half-demon blood, Lo had managed to eke out a path of his own by complete accident. It was entirely unscientific. While Shen sighed, there came the sound of another set of jumbled footsteps. And as soon as he heard them, Shen knew what was coming wouldn't be good. Ming Fong stepped out into the clearing, leading several low-ranked disciples. Upon seeing Ning Ying, he delightedly strode up and grabbed her hand. "Oh, Zhao Shime, I finally found you. How could you come up to a place like this without saying anything? The backside of the mountain is so large. What if some dangerous beast or poisonous snake leapt out? Come, Zhizhong has something fun to show you." Naturally, Ming Fong saw Lo sitting silently nearby, but he ignored the other boy as if he was nothing but air. However, Lo, being very well-mannered, opened his eyes and spoke Xizhong. I'm not afraid of a poisonous snake or a dangerous beast. Besides, isn't Lo with me? Ning Ying giggled. Mingfan swept his gaze towards Lo, squinted and scoffed. To Shen, Mingfan's thoughts couldn't have been clearer. He heard the affectionate way that Ning Ying addressed Lo, and in that moment, his annoying Shidi had become even more irritating. In the end, Ning Ying had a young girl's disposition, completely unable to take a hint or read the room. What fun thing does Xizhong have? She asked, head tilted. Hurry up and show me. Mingfang became all smiles. He unfastened a deep green jade ornament from his waist and held it in front of her. Oh, Shimei, my family just came to visit, and they brought me lots of high-quality, interesting little trinkets. I thought this one was particularly pretty, so I'll give it to you. Ning Ying took it and examined closely in the sunlight. Well, do you like it? Mingfan asked eagerly. From his hiding place, Shen finally remembered. This was that scene. Not good! He shouldn't have come! Danger! Oh no! He couldn't have been blamed for not remembering clearly. How could someone who'd cursed dumb fuck author dumb fuck novel remember ancient content from the beginning of a serialized novel that had been running for 4 years and covered an in-narrative span of 200 years? Wait, what? Oh shit. We're gonna write that down. He'd spent nearly 20 days binging the novel from start to finish. So he'd clean forgotten that wump-filled arc of pointless abuse that covered Lo's beginnings at the sect. He read like millions of pages in 2 weeks or in 20 days? Dude, what? Ning Ying had absolutely no idea what was high quality and what wasn't. And after looking nonchalantly at it for a while, she tossed the jade ornament back. Mingfan's smile froze on his face. What? This color's so ugly. The one that Lo has is prettier, Ning Ying said carelessly as she wrinkled her nose. Not only did Mingfan look unhappy, but Lo, who'd been wisely pretending not to exist, trembled lightly as his eyes snapped open. Does Shidi also wear this kind of thing? Mingfan spat through gritted teeth. Lo hesitated slightly. He hadn't managed to answer when Ning Ying barged in. Well, of course he does. Every day he wears it close around his neck. It's his treasure. He refuses to even let me look at it. Although Lo was usually so composed, at this point his expression also changed. He unconsciously clutched the goddess of mercy, Guanyin pendant around his neck and hidden beneath his clothes. Your IQ and EQ, young lady. The male lead is taking all the collateral damage. Ning Ying absolutely hadn't considered the consequences of those words as she said them. She'd only been thinking of how she always saw Lo wearing the jade, Guanyin, close to his skin, never parting with it. Girls in particular invariably wanted to get their hands on the things that their crushes treasured, which they hoped would confer upon them the satisfaction of being in a special position. But Lo simply refused to give her that recognition. Displeased, she brought it up in this half-sweet, half-brazen manner. Of course he refused, okay? Lo's washerwoman mother had spent almost her entire life savings to finally, with great difficulty, give her son the consecrated protective charm that she wanted for him. It was the only bit of warmth in Lo's dark world, always by his side, and even in the future, when he was at his darkest, he could summon upon the last dregs of humanity, so how could he randomly hand it to anyone else? Mingfan, both angry and jealous, advanced a few steps. Oh, Lo Shidi, you are sure stuck up, refusing to show Ning Ying Shime your pendant. He snarled, this keeps up. When we face strong enemies in the future, will you refuse to even lend a hand? Young man, there are definitely a logical gap between your first and second lines. It's fine if he doesn't want to, Xizhang. Don't bully him. Ying Ying hadn't thought these things would turn out this way, and she anxiously stamped her feet. How could Lo best Mingfan at this point? Not to mention a group of junior disciples who were Mingfan's lackeys, who were also ganging up on him. In a moment, that jade Guanyin fell from Lo's neck into Mingfan's hand. Mingfan raised it up for a look and then suddenly laughed out loud. Why are you laughing? Ying Ying said, confused. I thought it had to be some kind of rare treasure for him to protect it so fiercely. Shmi, guess what it is? He tossed the jade pendant into Ying Ying's hands, positively gleeful as he chuckled. It's a counterfeit. And that's it for this one. Oh no, to page 31 we say. Oh my God. That's where we're going to end. Well, damn it. Already, man. Well, this first part was insanely, it took me a lot longer to read than I intended. So give me just a second and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're going to talk about this in a short minute, but the e-published version is not accurate with this. So even though it says page 31 on this e-version, I'm already on page 40 in here. So we're just going to go ahead and read till the end of chapter 4. And this is going to be chapters 1 through 4 up into page 48. So I'm going to have to discuss with Discord how this all works and reorganize this, but we're going to go ahead and read the next part up until the next couple pages, because I've still got a little bit left to go before I reach the end of chapter 4, and then we'll just go from there. So why not? So it's a counterfeit. Counterfeit, Ning Ying Ying asked. What's that? Well, give it back, Lo. Give it back. Lo enunciated each word. His fist slowly clenched, a treacherous undercurrent surging in the depths of his eyes. Shen's fingers involuntarily twitched once, then again and again. Naturally, he remembered that the jade Guanyin was a counterfeit, but he also knew it was Lo's biggest berserk button. For an entire year, the washerwoman had scrimped and saved on food and utilities. But because she lacked experience, a conman had tricked her into paying a high price for a fake charm. Heartbroken after this, her body had steadily deteriorated. Lo would undoubtedly be unable to forget this pain the rest of his life. Thus, this was the one insult that Lo could never tolerate. As a bystander, Shen desperately wanted to reach out, beat up Mingfan, snatch back the jade pendant, and toss it to Lo. Also, if he did that, maybe Mingfan wouldn't thoroughly offend Lo. Then, later on, he could keep his paltry little life. OOC. Thank you, shut up. You want it back? I'll give it back. Who knows which street stall this cheap thing was purchased from? Mingfan plucked the pendant from Ning Ying Ying's hands, disgust in his tone. I'm afraid giving it to Shmi would dirty her hands. So he said, but he had not the slightest intention of returning it. Lo's face was tight. Suddenly he struck out with both fists, hitting the couple of low-ranked disciples restraining him. Enraged as he was, his blows were not directed by technique. They were random strikes fueled by the anger within. At first, he managed to cow these low-ranked disciples, but they quickly realized that he was in truth incredibly weak, and that only his demeanor was impressive. Also, Mingfan was snarling at them. What are you standing there for? He dared to attack his Xizhang. Teach him what it means to respect seniority. At this, they all regained their courage and surrounded Lo, clobbering him. Ning Ying Ying was scared stiff, her pitiful brain capacity still not understanding how things had progressed to this state. Oh, Xizhang, she cried, how could you do this? Hurry up and tell them to stop, or I'll never talk to you again. Shmi, don't be angry, Mingfan said in a panic. I'll tell them to stop hitting this guy, okay? He was distracted. Before he finished speaking, Lo broke free from the many arms and legs entangling him and sent a fist into Mingfan's nose. A wild wail. Two twin streams of fresh blood jetted from Mingfan's nostrils. Although she had been about to burst into tears at the sight of this Ning Ying Ying, whose name is so annoying to say. Ning Ying Ying is so frustrating. Couldn't help but let out a stifled laugh. Sister, do you like Lo Bing, or do you want to screw him over? Shen howled in his mind. Before this point, Ming Fan might feasibly have let Lo go, but now that he'd been humiliated in front of his crush, he couldn't back down no matter what. The two boys twisted into a fighting heap, but no matter how exceptional Lo's talents, he was still young, and he hadn't been cultivating with proper instruction. It was, for the most part, a one-sided beatdown. Yet Lo remained silent, teeth clenched. Shinwan desperately intervened, but the system exploded with a terrifying cascade of alarms. Severe OOC, severe OOC, severe OOC. Important things must be repeated 3 times. In this situation, Shin Qingshou would choose to smile. He would watch from the sidelines, hands in his sleeves, or would personally beat Lo himself. Was it really going to make him look on while a child was being abused? This was too much. Even so, Shin couldn't afford to take risks. While he was anxiously fretting, a compromise suddenly came to him. Kangshong Mountains had a minor technique, plucking leaves, flying flowers. At a glance, it wasn't very useful, just aesthetic and interesting. The novel had described how Lo used the technique to win the nth woman's affections. As Shin had, since his arrival, been furiously reviewing various manuals, he had also recently seen a description of it. He plucked a nearby leaf and channeled a touch of spiritual power into it. The first time he channeled too much. The leaf couldn't withstand the power and instantly split into several pieces. He succeeded the second time and held the leaf between his fingertips and gently blew, letting it go. It shot towards Ming Fan like an airborne knife. As Ming Fan's long, horrible scream split the air, Shin shook out his hand and wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. No wonder they said to an expert even a flower or tree could be used to hurt people. But he hadn't killed Ming Fan just now, right? Lo had suffered quite a few punches and kicks, but suddenly it was Ming Fan who staggered backwards. Lo looked up. Fresh blood dripped from his forehead past his eyes. But he hadn't expected to see Ming Fan stretching out his own hand, his palm also covered in blood. Ming Fan stared in belief. You dare to use a knife? Due to its fierceness, Ning Ying Ying hadn't risked coming close to their fight, but now she turned to hurry and throw herself between the two. No! Lo doesn't have a knife. It wasn't him. Lo also had no idea what had happened. He closed his mouth tightly and tried to clean the blood from his face. Did you see clearly? Was he holding a knife? Ming Fan interrogated the other disciples as blood seeped out of his back like he'd been cut with the edge of a sword. The disciples looked around at each other completely in disarray, some shaking their heads, some nodding. Ming Fan was a spoiled and pampered young master, and he had never suffered this level of physical pain. The sight of his own hand covered with blood sent panic surging through his heart. The puzzling thing was that there was no evidence of a weapon either on the ground or on Lo Bing's slender person. It couldn't have vanished in thin air, right? Shin held his breath. His vision suddenly flashed red, and a huge line of floating text popped up before him in a blood-red eye-catching as it was bone-chilling. Violation. OOC, B points -10, current B points 90. Shin released his breath, relieved. He'd been prepared for a deduction in the realm of 50, or to even lose everything. Only 10 was much better than he'd thought. He'd take the loss for now. There'd be future chances to earn those points back. Then, shortly after, he let out that breath. Ming Fan pointed to Lo and yelled, "Get him!" Shin nearly vomited a mouthful of blood straight from his chest. The gang of disciples had heard the order and tackled Lo. Shin unconsciously tore off a nearby handful of leaves and sent them all singing through the air. He regretted this as soon as they left his hand. The fuck am I doing? No matter what happens, Lo is the magnificent male lead. It's not like he's never been ganged up on before. Like they could beat him to death. Like hell you need to worry, self. He might have gotten in the way of the first interference, but now? Fantastic. Even an idiot would notice something was off. Numerous disciples were splattered with blood. They anxiously gathered around Ming Fan, no longer daring to gang up on Lo. Xizhang, what's going on? I've also been cut. Ming Fan's face was green and white. Only after a moment did he yell out, "Go!" Leading his group of lackeys, all covering their backs and holding their arms, he frantically withdrew. They truly came like the wind and left like it too. Only Ning Ying Ying remained, standing there dumbly for a while. Then she shouted, "Lo, were you the only one who sent them running just now?" Lo Bing shook his head. Expression gloomy, he stood up, straightening with difficulty. Then he bent down again and, with a tense look, searching the ground for something, turning over fallen leaves, dry twigs, and mud this way and that over and over again. Shen knew what he was looking for. Naturally, it was the jade pendant, which had been lost in the confusion. He saw it, clear as day. Before fighting, Mingfan had swung out his arm, and as he did, the pendant's red string had snagged on a branch high above their heads. But Shen couldn't point that out. Also, just after he'd sent the leaves flying, he'd heard a heart-shattering system scream, "Violation! OOC! B points! 10 times 6! Current B points! 30!" In an instant, he'd fallen below the passing grade. "So 1 leaf equals 10 points? Don't use such a simple, crude arithmetic!" Ning Yingying didn't dare speak. After all, she'd caused this entire affair. If not for her big mouth, Lo would never have suffered a beating. On top of that, he'd lost his pendant for no good reason. She swiftly began to help Lo's search. They, of course, remained empty-handed, even as it became dark. Lo stood dumbly in place, staring at the mess on the ground. They had overturned every speck of dirt in sight, but they hadn't found it. "Lo, if we can't find it, let's just let it be," said Ning Yingying, a little frightened to see him so dazed and out of his mind. She took his hand. "I'm sorry, I'll buy you another one later, all right?" But Lo paid her no heed. He slowly withdrew his hand and walked towards the forest edge, his head lowered. Ning hurried after him. Shen was truly impressed with himself. These 2 children had searched for an entire afternoon, and he'd actually gone and watched the whole time. How could he explain that to himself, other than to say he had too much fucking time on his hands? He waited until they'd gone a good distance, and then he finally emerged from his hiding place. He raised his head and looked around, then tapped his foot on the ground. In that moment, he experienced what might have been a body as light as a swallow. And with great ease, he rose and plucked the jade pendant from where it caught on the branch. In truth, Shen wanted to secretly return it to Lo, but he was now familiar with the system's rules. That would definitely count as a violation. He didn't have any B points to squander. After some thought, Shen decided to keep it for the time being. Maybe later, this jade pendant would be of great use. For example, perhaps during a critical moment, when his fate hung by a thread, he could bargain with it in exchange for his life. Shen gave this possibility serious consideration. Right then, a line of green text with a pronounced 3D effect jumped into view. "Congratulations! Obtained key item, fake jade guanyin ×1. For changing the storyline, Shen Qingshou IQ plus 100. Current B points 130. Please continue to work hard." All the points that had just been deducted were not only restored, but he got even more. On top of that, given the influence that this jade guanyin had on Lo, it was definitely a high-level item, and it could be used to preserve his life. What a happy surprise! A rush of satisfaction flowed through Shen, cleansing him of the gloom that had set in while crouched in the dark for that whole afternoon. At this moment, even the system's eminently punchable Google Translate-like voice was melodious beyond compare. Meanwhile, outside the forest, Lo had already left the back of the mountain, and he slowly unclenched his fist. Lying in his palm was a whole green leaf. Its edges were sharp and stained with blood. So sorry I lied about how many chapters I was going to read. Want to talk about them? Well, I kept reading the digital version. I was like, I feel like I've read for a long time. I didn't know exactly where a stopping point was. And so I was like, where exactly am I going to stop at? And so then when I stopped the first part of the reading, I went back to the book and started looking through it. I was like, oh, why am I on page 40 when it says 31 on the screen? So in other words, this, and my dog is like, you've done enough. So in other words, this book does not align with the online e-file that I have. So I'm going to talk to Discord about that before recording next week. And when I come back next week, I have a feeling that with Scum Villain, because we are tracing timelines, because we're doing all sorts of different things than I have done with Heaven Official's Blessing or with Modao Zushi, it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, work in progress. So this novel reading and reactions are probably going to be a lot different than the other ones in terms of just how everything gets set up, but I'm still going to be reading them like I did with Heaven Official's Blessing and Modao Zushi, just going through them, and it's probably going to take more time because there's a lot going on, and we're going to talk about this. So this is Conspiracy Board Sama. You can see that he's huge. If I stand up, this board is like nearly 6 foot tall. It is enormous. But I feel like Whiteboard-Kun is not big enough to contain all of the plot line and things. This board is probably going to look ridiculous by the time we get through volume 1, much less the other volumes. So, and my dogs are just going to have to work with it and bring his toy around here and be a good boy, right? He's looking at me like, no. So what I've done up here is start the timeline out from what we get from this novel, first of all, and go through. We do get 2 awesome images. We got to see a nice image of Lo looking very sad and dejected, looking like a little lamb. And then we get to see Shen looking pissed off as he woke up. Shen is different already in the novel than the Donghua, just a wee bit. We're going to talk about it. But I am really excited to see what we get. So, first of all, they just come out of the woodwork in the novel and just tell us that Lo is half demon. They're just like, yep, he's half demon. There you go. And I was like, oh, okay. Done. No speculation about that. So I'm going to tell you what's on Conspiracy Board Sama before we go through the novel and whatever's left on there. So we know that Lo is a half demon. His mother is unfortunately dead, his biological mom and his adopted mom, the matricide of MXTX. MXTX don't like a mama. We're going to matricize the hell out of all of them. And I was like, why? But he basically has a father, Tian Lanjun, and Tian Lanjun is the saintly ruler of the demon realm, and he is imprisoned for eternity within a mountain. Like you do. So basically that's what's going on with there. And his mother was a cultivator for a righteous sect. They don't say which sect she's from. I don't know if that's going to come into play later on in the novel. It might, so we can just hold off on that. But she basically sent her son out of a ship to go adrift and escape. And that's where he ran into, interestingly enough, I think the Donghua, I don't know if the Donghua exactly, I think they streamlined things a little bit. The novel was a lot less fast-paced than the Donghua was, which it's apples and oranges at this point, whichever you prefer. But some fishermen pulled Lo out and he wandered the streets. Now, I'll say just briefly, that reminds me a lot of Modao Zushi a little bit, because the character of Wei Wuxian is kind of, has had similar moments in his story than Lo with that wandering the streets until they were adopted. That's very much similar in Modao Zushi, so I thought that was interesting. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, and then the unhealthy environment, the novel makes a point of saying the unhealthy environment that Lo has been involved in was the foundation of his personality. So that's going to be the big thing, because the Donghua has made it out to where these little acts of kindness that Shen does with him are making all the difference for him altering his personality, at least altering it in terms of how he reacts to Shen. Now, I like how they describe in the novel the moment that Lo becomes part of the demon clan again and he activates his demon blood. It's called the darkening. It's like his cultivation, like his blood becomes black and his aura darkens. I like this post-darkening and the terminology they use for it. But they describe that post-darkening, his foundation of his personality has been set, where he fights for every scrap. He fights for what he wants, so I feel like that's still going to come into play later on with his character. He seeks revenge for the smallest grievance. I mean, he was jealous at a girl because the one lady said that Shen was looking at her, and he was jealous, so that checks out. And he hides murderous intent behind a smile. He seems pretty innocent when he's talking to Shen throughout the Donghua, but we'll see. The novel definitely makes it a lot more apparent how dark and sinister Lo is as the protagonist. Whereas, and I'm wondering how that's going to change as we go through the novel, because in the Donghua, Lo looks like a damn puppy the whole time. And that kind of lulls you into this false sense of security, and you kind of forget that, oh yeah, he's supposed to be like this after he becomes, the demon lord. And it's like, so what do we do with that? So that's going to be interesting. And then here, we have the leaf in the original timeline was lost, and Lo used that as a moment that kind of cemented to him that he was going to kill Ming Fan later on. Here, we have side by side with it. We've changed the timeline a little bit, where the leaf was found, the jade pendant, not necessarily the leaf, but the jade pendant was originally lost. now it was found by Shen and he's going to keep it for later. So this is the first moment in chapter 3 and 4 where the storyline has been altered. The jade pendant, instead of being lost, Shen used the leaves to make sure to distract, make Mingfan and the others leave, and he kept the pendant for himself. I do like that last line of chapter 4 where Lo says that he was looking at the leaf in his hand and seeing like the razor edges covered in blood. So it's like, on the one hand, yeah, he still has this very like this seared imagery in his head of like this leaf with blood. He knows someone interfered and possibly saved him from getting beaten up even more, but he doesn't know what the cause of it was. He doesn't know who saved him, and the pendant is still lost, which is a source of aggravation for Lo. So interesting. Now here, we have down here where the Donghua left off that we know the story is going to pick back up. And that is that Shen in the original version is your stereotypical villain. He's a hypocrite. And Shen Yan, who has taken on the body of Shen, is like, I want to change that, damn it. He's not going to be a hypocrite. He's going to be a decent character. So he wants to change that. But at the Congress, where we left off in the Donghua, apparently he kicks Lo, or it said he was scheming to get Lo kicked into the abyss. So even the novel doesn't necessarily acknowledge that Shen is responsible for Lo getting into the abyss. So there's that. But at the Congress, Lo ends up in the boundary between the human world and the demon realm, which is called the abyss. And from it, he finds his personal sword, Shen Mo. And when he finds Shen Mo, he uses it to release the bodily seal and release the demon blood. So basically, we haven't even mentioned Nightmare at this point. What's interesting is the novel hasn't even mentioned Nightmare. It hasn't even brought him up yet. He's not even been a thing like he was in episode 1 where they mentioned him. He's not even mentioned in the novel at all. In the Donghua, Nightmare wanted to help cultivate his ability as a demon. So that obviously seems to happen during this time. He has Jinmo, he releases the seal where he can activate all of his inner demonic aura, and he cultivates in the abyss and learns techniques that he didn't know before. In the Donghua, it's presumed through working with Nightmare, and then he hangs back, and then he heads back. Now, the novel makes the point of saying he heads back to where Shen is from, and I think that that's still going to happen, except instead of being mad at Shen, he might be mad on Shen's behalf and go after him to try to find his Gege again, basically, right? But it says that he goes down this dark path to never return. So in the OG novel, all the bad things that have happened to him kind of cultivate and accumulate into the moment where he gets out of the pit and he decides to go back and he's turned evil. That's basically what's happened. But it also said in the novel that he steadily improves lying and scheming in the OG version to gain trust of those that he's going to kill. And then through that, he rose in power and terror, and his black heart hardened more and more. So that part there, like, we've seen changes in Lo and his behavior and his devotion towards Shen up through the Donghua at this point. So it's like, are all of these bad things that have happened to Lo, how are they going to be altered? Are they going to be altered? How are they going to change from what the novel originally presents us? And then it says he returns to the demon realm at some point, takes on the mantle of saintly ruler, but he's unsatisfied and goes after the sects one by one and destroys them. I'm curious about that too, because I wonder if people in the Donghua are going to try to scheme against Shen and frame him, because in the OG version, he loses a lot of reputation. So I wonder if that's going to happen in this version, and Lo is going to take on each of the sects to protect Shen rather than kill them off. I'm going to be really curious to see how the story changes, just like it's changed this moment, how these moments are going to change later on. But I feel like that's going to be way down the line. I don't feel like we're going to touch that in volume 1 at all. It's just going to stay here and be somewhere else. So there's other two up here. This is the bad ending we don't want. And that is where they don't mention a damn pickle jar in this novel. No. They just mention that, oh, no big deal. Shen just gets his arms and legs and tongue cut off. I was like, oh, shit, before his death. And I'm like, oh, crap, that's horrible. So a lot more gruesome than a damn pickle jar. Pickle jar is bad enough. But Okay, that makes a lot more sense why Shen is so terrified at the prospect of the ending, because I was like, oh, being a pickle jar is not that bad. But, not having a tongue and having your arms and legs cut off, yeah, that's pretty bad. So that's the ending we don't want. And then another ending we don't want is we talk about how Qingyan, he's originally killed by Shen in the OG version. Like, has thousands of arrows shot at him till he's ground to a pulp. And in this version, Shen's like, I really don't want to kill him. I kind of like him. Also, I realized that the Donghua made me so suspicious. I think it was, partially me watching and reading the other MXTX series, but also because Yu's animation in the Donghua is a bit creepy. But I was fully expecting Yu to be like a secret bad guy, but I don't think he's going to be in this case. I think he's just a nice guy that suffers, and Shen's like, oh, I don't want to kill him now. So that's where the timeline is at. And I don't know for sure. I might in future volumes, because this did take me, after I got done reading, this took me a while to write out and put together. It doesn't seem like it would take that long, but it did. So what I might do is I might just use Whiteboard-Kun for future parts as we go through the discussions, and then transfer whatever we talk about on Whiteboard-Kun over to Conspiracy Board Sama. And I may take a photo of this to post in this video at the end of the discussion, be like, here's what it looks like now, and I'll post it in the Discord and things like that. So I'll probably end up doing that. Like I said, the fact that we are dealing with a story that has a timeline that is altering as we go in real time in the story, this reaction discussion is going to maybe be a little bit different than normal. So I don't know. It's going to take me probably a little bit of time to get my footing, to get my foothold, to feel comfortable with how to do the discussion, and also to figure out how many chapters I'm reading per week. Because clearly I started out this episode being like, I'm going to read 2 chapters, and then I ended up reading 4. So we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. We got 4 novels to get through. You all are here for the ride anyway, right? So, okay. So let's talk about this novel and the first 4 chapters of it, because I really like Shen. I'm kind of torn, because there is a part of me that really likes the oblivious peacockness of Shen in the Donghua. This version of Shen's a little bit different. I'm not gonna lie. I like Shen a lot in the novel version already, but he is a little bit different than the Donghua version, just a little wee bit. The Donghua version, he seems like he comes into this world kind of oblivious, like he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know the tropes. He doesn't know how the system works. He just was reading this one novel, spent all his time reading it, and then died choking on a bun, and then showed up in this world. Here, we don't get to know exactly how he dies. We just know that he dies. But this version of Shen is still a bit peacocky, which I like, but he's not nearly, at least in terms of how the novels work and how the tropes work, he is not nearly as oblivious. Now, the romance part is going to be interesting to see how oblivious he is, especially since we get to see inside of his head in this version, more so than we do just the internal monologue. So we get to see his version, his internal thoughts in italics. But he's an otaku. He's a nerd. He knows the tropes of the story, which is really fun. He knows exactly how the story has gone, but he does make a point that he read this whole thing in 20 days, which is insane. And so he doesn't remember some of the finer points. He's like, wait, that happened now? That's happening now? Oh, crud. Okay. But he skimmed through it, and there's a lot of little tiny references. I feel like MXTX, what's hilarious about this is she wrote this as her first story, but a lot of the things that she talks about as an author that would be frustrating from a reader are things that she encounters later on through writing Heaven Official's Blessing. So it's so funny to see this kind of meta thing she was transfixed on as a writer, worried about what the readers thought, actually comes into play as she's writing one of her other stories. So it's really, really funny to me. That's really funny. I like it a lot. But we find out that, interestingly enough, Shen is a younger brother. He has 2 older brothers, and he has a younger sister. He's like a middle child, classic middle child syndrome. But he does have this air to him that likes caring for people. And he talks about caring for his younger sister and being close to his family. And I feel like that's pretty important, because I feel like that will tie into how he cares for Lo and how he cares for people, and that natural affection and compassion that he has in his heart that maybe he doesn't want to admit is going to naturally be exuded throughout the story, whereas the OG Shen, that's the villain, would not exude those same type of emotions. So I think that's really important to point out with his character at this point in the story. So I like that. I like that a lot. But yeah, so we find out that Lo is 14 when this part of the story starts. And then he's 17 when they go to the Congress. So he grows up a little bit since then. We get the dad's name, everything like that. Proud Immortal Demon Way. Oh my God. The dumb fuck author, dumb fuck novel. Oh my gosh. I love it. And basically just he's tired. All the plot holes, all the things about the novel he doesn't like. He's like, why are things like this? And then he gets stuck. I like that the activation code is the last line that he says when he dies. And he ends up getting transfixed into the novel. Now, there was a line on page 12. It said, you can up, but you can no BB. You up. And I was like, what the hell is this? The novel, the digital version that I had for this part did not have these notes. And I was really confused by that. But the novel does talk about it. So on page 15 of the novel, we'll get to that. Find it real quick. They have a little side note that says, you up, no BB is a common Chinese meme. This is a deliberately and entertainingly bad translation of the phrase, and they give it in Chinese. And it says, basically, if you're capable, then do it. If you're not, then shut the fuck up. And that's hilarious to me. I was like, okay, all right, fair enough. There was also another part too that I marked the page for it. And it was when Shen was describing himself as a courtyard concubine. So there may be some Diva Peacock in there that we've not totally gotten into. It says it refers to the complicated courtyard compounds of rich families in old China. Generally, once a concubine enters a family, they can't leave the area, which can contribute to bitterness and feelings of being trapped. Which could kind of relate to Shen's emotions throughout this, of being trapped in this body and having to go through this system. What can we do? So yeah, so Shen tries to figure out exactly why he's there, and he's in that body and figuring out. I love the idea of the self-saving system like a Google Translate, and I almost like anytime I see the words in there, I want to say it in like this little dialect that's like this on a computer. So we'll probably have that, which I'm really excited about. But I like that Shen has like been waiting to like his like dream was to be transmigrating into a novel. And he's read all these other Zhongdian literature, which I'm sure is like the same thing. And he's like been, read all these various types of do-overs and male power fantasies. And so he would have happily accepted this fate. But now he's in like, he doesn't get to transmigrate into the role of the protagonist, of course. Ironically, he is. But he's instead in the role of the villain. So it's like, So yeah, the amicable looking elder brother type beside him was the current sect leader, Yu Qingzhong. And that's when, and I'm just going to say this. I agree. Whoever commented at one point in this saying that this series has some of the most hard to pronounce names that are very traditional Chinese names. They are hard. Like the Qing, where it's Qingyong and Qingchu and Qingyi. I'm like, oh my God, there's too much. And then Ming Yingying. When she was just in the Dongwall, and I only had to say her name like 2 times, it wasn't so bad. But in this, I'm like, I've got to shorten it to just Ming. Because if I say Ming Yingying, it's like a damn tongue twister. And saying Shen Yan versus Shen Qingchu, I'm like, just call him Shen. I'm like, going to have to stick with just the first names. Because otherwise, it's going to drive me absolutely crazy. So yeah, so we get a couple of clarifications in this. One is that if you run out of B points, which are badass points, that you just automatically go back to your original world and you do die. You don't get reborn, you literally die and go back. And he thinks he's dead in the original world, so he's like, shit, if I don't stay here, I'm gonna die. So my thing is he gonna stay there forever? Is that the end goal, that he just stays in this world forever and lives out the rest of his days? I mean, that sucks he doesn't get to see his family again, but he's dead, so he wouldn't get to anyway, so... okay. I mean, if he ends up living out the rest of his days with Lo in this world, why not? So I liked that in his previous life, Shen had been a well-off growing up. I think that's interesting that he was called Shen in his previous life. So maybe each iteration of his life, he has to play a Shen. Maybe that's how the transmigration works. I don't know. But he talks about having this carefree upbringing where he didn't have any competition, no pressure. He was basically kind of spoiled. And here he's now having to like fight to stay alive, which is kind of cool. It makes me like Shen's character a little bit even more, right? He's like, even if Lo was blessed and heavenly talented, even if his attitude was exceptional to the point where he was more or less cheating, there was still no need to envy him to that extent, you know? I like the idea that it kind of explains why Shen's not really jealous of Lo. He's like, he doesn't have any reason to be jealous of him. But also, Shen, for the very beginning of this novel, it reminds me of Wei Wuxian a little bit. It reminds me of Wei Wuxian and Modao Zushi just a little bit, where it's like, Shen is already like talking about how handsome Lo is and how heart-stopping he is and how he just can't live without. Like, if I saw him on the spot, I'd probably faint and all this. And I'm like, sir, I don't think that Shen realizes that he likes Lo or that he likes men yet. He even talks about it, how he doesn't have a girlfriend, but he's never really looked for one. And I was like, okay. All right, you've never been interested in women before. That's fine. That happens all the time. But you're talking an awful lot about how Lo's really handsome. I think that might be a sign of something, but I can't wait till the cave scene. I'm hoping we get to the cave scene next week. I'm really hoping we get to that, but we'll see. So then we have this idea of what the B points are doing. The more B points one accrues, the more magnificent, high quality, and first rate the work has become. So it's almost like the story starts out deliberately as shit so that you can enhance it as you go, is what it seems like. And it's like, okay. So then it's like, how do you raise your B points? And they're like, change the nonsensical plot, raise the IQ of the villain and supporting characters, avoid the landmines that break suspension of disbelief, ensure the main character satisfaction, and discover and finish the hidden plot events. So, I mean, basically, he has to change the plot and make it work since he said it was nonsensical. He said everybody was a dummy in this story, so he has to make them smarter. He has to basically make the story more believable. He has to make the main character satisfied so it changes the course of the story. And then he has to discover the hidden plot elements, which will make the story make sense, whereas in the beginning he said it was nonsensical. So the thing I like about this is that when he asks, how do you qualify the plot as nonsensical, the story says the standard is subjectively determined. It depends on the reader's reactions. So basically, what the self-saving system is telling Shen is that the hidden plot and changing the plot is all relying upon what you want out of this story, which is another way of saying you secretly wanted this to be like a gay romance with you and Lo. You didn't want Lo to end up with this harem and all these grandchildren. You wanted it to be him and you, right? And that's what you're wanting to change it to. You just don't realize it yet. And it's like, and it's suggesting that the plot would subjectively change depending on who transmigrated into the story. It wouldn't have to always be this way. It just is this way because it's Shen. Huh. I think that's interesting. I really like that. And then we establish the OC and how that works and everything there. They do things a little differently in the novel where we don't get like, I feel like we didn't get an immediate reduction of the OC points right off the bat like we did with the Donghua, because I think in the Donghua they had to give us what the mechanism was. They had to explain how the mechanism worked in the original. And here, instead, we kind of learn right off the bat how the mechanism works with the OOC function, and they don't have to physically show us. So I feel like that's a little bit different in the novel than from the Donghua. Poor Lo, though. Like, they establish in this that Lo has been beaten several times, and he's been strung up and beaten and abused already several times, and Shen's just like, let's not talk about that. It's like, oh no! So I'm going to be really curious, because it seemed like in the Donghua that Nightmare was trying to prey off of that information that Shen had abused him in the past, and Lo was able to kind of like look away from it and be like, oh, let's not worry about that. Here, since it's happened so many times, I'm wondering if that's going to make a difference. If it's going to make a difference, whether or not Lo goes back to those memories or not. That's going to be interesting to see. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, right? Interesting. And so I like that Shen says that Lo's current pitifulness directly correlates to his future ferocity, as he's like, he suffers in silence now and absorbs it all, and then later when he has power, he like deals it back twice fold. And actually like brings people, to, as he says here, the humiliation this disciple once suffered will be returned 100-fold. So it's kind of like, until Shen opened up the idea of being kind to him, he was on the pathway where he looked innocent now, but he was going to come back to those moments and been like, I was innocent and here's how you treated me, so I'm going to get back at you 10 times over, So that's interesting. I do like getting inside of Shen's head. I like the italics. I like us seeing what he's thinking. That's really good. I don't know. I can kind of get, I've had a lot of people talk about how they're not really crazy about the Shen and Lo ship because of how young Lo is at the start of this. And I don't know. Modao Zushi, they're the same age, so that's not an issue. In Heaven Official's Blessing, it's one of those things where they start out and there's like a little bit of an age difference, but it's not a big age difference. But then by the time you get to the current plot of the story, it doesn't make any difference. And if you read Heaven Official's Blessing, you'll know why. Here, it's kind of a weird thing because on the one hand, Shen and Lo aren't like immortals. They're humans. They're mortals. And there seems to be an age gap. And it's almost hinted at that Shen's been the same age for a while now because he's mastered cultivation and gotten to the point where he doesn't age anymore. So we don't really know how old Shen is. So I can't understand why somebody would find it kind of weird at first with the Lo and Shen dynamic. At least at this point, it is kind of weird. But I think the thing that's helpful is that when Shen is fantasizing about Lo, it's adult Lo. It's Lo when he's a full-blown adult, not Lo now. And I think that does make a difference. So I think it depends on your preferences and how far you can let it go with this being a cultivation story. I'm okay with it as long as, he hits on Lo when he's an adult and not while he's a kid, then I think it's fine. But we'll probably talk about it as we go through the novel and move forward with it. We'll probably keep talking about it, right? So I like that Shen says he's a man of few needs. He would just idle by if he could. But he obviously can't. He's like, it's not that I don't want to cling to the lead man's thighs, but who made him so damn black-hearted? He's the type who seeks 1,000-fold retribution. I like that line. Basically, Shen's like, it's not like I don't want to get all over him, but he's such a bastard. And I'm like, you're not helping your situation, Shen. You're not helping convince us of any of this, right? I like that he keeps cursing the Great Master Airplane. That part's really funny. I like it. So yeah, so I do appreciate that we get a lot of Shen talking about the backstory with the powers. Like he explains how the leaves work. He explains how the world building works. He explains how he studied some of the cultivation while he was down in the library. I like that Shen runs through all of this so that if you're not understanding how this works, he kind of explains the system and the world building alongside the novel just in case you're curious, right? So yeah, and then we go through the forest and he tests out his sword, Zhu Ya, to see how it's going to work, and that's when he stumbles across Ning Ying Ying. And what I like about this is the novel clearly explains to us that Shen is kind of disgusted by the idea that in the OG version, Shen had this like lecherous lust after little Ning Ying Ying. He had this lust after her because he's a hypocrite and he's shady and he's supposed to seem pure-hearted and free of desire and immune to wicked temptations, but beneath the surface, he's immoral, shameless, scummy, and despicable. And Shen's job is to transition his character away from that. He ends up in the end being shady and despicable, and he deserves to have his limbs chopped off. Here, Shen's like, I need to turn that image around. So I like that that's also a good reasoning why he doesn't like Ying Ying and tries to actively discourage liking her. I think that works pretty good. But he's like, how am I supposed to do this if the OOC character mode won't let me help him right out? I like that right from the beginning, we get the little tiny inklings that Shen is wanting to help Lo, but he doesn't exactly know what to do. So that's when Ming Fan shows up and he gets the idea to throw the leaves at him. I love when the system only takes off 10 points for the first leaf. And so he's like, oh, I got 90 points left. I can afford that. So he throws 6 more leaves and it deducts 60 because it did 10 times 6. He's like, no! Like that part, it adds more stakes right off the bat. It adds more stakes because now that there's only 30 points left and we know that he's legit going to die if he runs out, then it adds some more stakes to it and makes you go, oh no, we've got to keep those B points up and help build those if we're going to be using a lot of them in the future. But Ning Ying Ying, dear God, that name, she is portrayed kind of like an airhead in this chapter. And again, one of Shen's goals is that he needs to help make the IQ of the characters higher. So I'm going to be curious what he does to help the situation with Ying Ying in the future. Because he's like, your IQ and EQ, young lady, the male lead's taking all the collateral damage. Love it. It's great. And then I like that he even calls out Ming Fan for having like some logical gaps in his arguments. And I think my favorite part of this chapter was when it's like, if he did this, Ming Fan wouldn't thoroughly offend Lo Bing, and later on he could keep his little pantry, his paltry little life if he just interferes. And I like the system just goes out of character, and he's like, thank you, shut up. I love the back and forth, like quick wit between him and the self-saving system. That part's so funny. I love that he instantly has like a comeback for the system as soon as she starts to bring up things, right? And I do love like the meta kind of referential humor. It's like severe OC, severe OC, severe OC. Important things must be repeated 3 times. It's like, yes, please. So he does the plucking leaves, flying flowers technique and gets the guys to go away, loses some B points for it, but he manages to get the jade pendant, and in doing so gains 100 B points to go back to 130 and raises his IQ. I wish that we would have had the moment where he's like, hooray for the kind person. That part was really funny, but yeah. So I feel like with reading the Donghua or watching the Donghua and going back to this first portion was just kind of setting up things on this end, and then setting up just Shen, how he knows about this world, how he knows to navigate it, what to do within it. I feel like it's all setting that up, which is really, really nice. So I'm excited about the prospect of where we go from here. I like the way this novel's set up. I like the way that Shen is narrating, and I'm really excited to see what all inside his head we actually get to examine. But before we go any further, I'm going to talk to Discord, find out what to do with the next set of chapters, and go from there. So I'm going to be tweaking, but it's going to work out. So I hope you all enjoyed this first reaction discussion. I don't think there's as much to talk about here because we've got it set up on Conspiracy Board Sama. It's pretty much like the first episode of the Donghua. I am a little bit saddened because the first opening with the narration was so funny, and here it's just kind of set up with Shen narrating instead of like that crazy omniscient narrator from the Donghua. There are some things left out, like nightmares left out of the novel at this point, so I'm gonna be curious to see where we go with that. But I also feel like the novel's gonna give us a lot more information too. Like it already gave us more backstory on Lo and on the fates of everybody, so we're gonna just have to keep track of that as well. So I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. But with that being said, I'm gonna rework how many chapters I'm doing, get ready for next week. But welcome to the novel. Welcome to Scum Villain Self-Saving System. I'm excited. I hope you all are too. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Scum Villains Self-Saving System. Bye!